I have a wonderful dilemma this morning, and that is because of extending the time of worship some, and please don't clap when I say this. I don't have time to say everything I was going to say. So just as a real quick word of instruction, in the projection booth, I'm going to start at slide 7. So that kind of gives them last week or a week before, I forgot to even give them a copy of the message, and they were flying along trying to follow me. So be glad you're not having to deal with that. They are very patient and kind. However, I will not ever regret God's presence making itself part of the proceedings. They are his proceedings, and I would rather hear one word from him than the entire dictionary from me or, frankly, any of you. As much as I love all of you and all of that, there is nothing I'd rather hear than just one word. When God just says light, everything changes. When God just says let there be, everything changes. When God says move, mountains move. In fact, there's a psalm that talks about the voice of the Lord, and it talks about making mountains skip like calves, and the cedar trees that split apart from the voice of the Lord. So when we have the opportunity to engage him, and here's the thing, we have that opportunity every week. We have to make the choice to engage him. So I'm just going to take, in fact, there's a third part to this pray, give, and serve. I probably will come back to it next week. But I want to just take what I was going to talk about, the way I was going to close, to talk a little bit, just for about 5 or 10 minutes about, because the whole purpose of this series has been about why the church is better. If you remember, there was a scripture that I used last week. In fact, it's the second slide, I think, that talks about Paul's writing to the church, and it says that Jesus designed the church that it operates best. Verse 16 of Ephesians 4 says, "From him the whole body, fitted and knit together by every supporting ligament, promotes the growth of the body." Notice it says promotes the growth of the body. The body is the church. "For building up itself in love by the proper working of each individual part." Now, I've been talking the last 2 weeks, and I will talk a little bit again next week, about why the church is better off when you're engaged. Why the church is healthiest when you choose to pray regularly for the church and for God's mission and being achieved in the church. When you choose to give and support, not just financially through the church, but give of yourself and give to those in need. When we choose to just be generous. And third, when we choose to serve. When we choose to find areas where we are in every supporting ligament. Maybe we're part of one thing, maybe we're part of another, but we've been gifted for certain things. We're designed in certain ways. Here's what I want to just spend a couple of minutes on today. And this was how I was going to wrap up. And that is not why the church is better off if you choose to serve and engage fully, but why you're happier and why you're better off. Because that's something, quite honestly, that a lot of us don't realize or think about. So I want to talk just for a couple of minutes about the fact that we are happiest when we are engaged, when we are serving, when we are giving of ourselves. And this past week, there's something that kind of got me started on this train, and that was, there's been a lot of work going on. If you were with us Wednesday night, you know it was a bit of a madhouse. And then, as God will do, things are constantly slightly changing, and so most of the day yesterday, I was over here, Debbie and I were over here packing and repacking and shifting things and figuring out, moving things out of our office and all of that. Here's what I noticed, though, was a couple of weeks ago when we did lunch over there, this week when we were packing, it was the amount of joy and interaction that was going on among us versus when everyone comes and sits and watches me. Because that's what church service basically is. And I don't mean like I'm that important. If you go to another church, you're going to sit and watch somebody else. That's just kind of how it works. When we choose not to really engage, or when we don't have a place to engage, we're not happier. And so I want to take all the way back to how we were originally designed, because I think I can convince you that you'll be happiest. The most engaged people are also the happiest people. And so I want to go all the way back to Genesis 1. And I think what you're going to see is when we are fulfilling our purpose, we are most happy, most fulfilled. And so what is our purpose? Why was man created? And so the very first time God says anything about a man is in verse 26 of Genesis 1. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image. This is slide 7, by the way. Now, let me stop right there for a minute. Let us make mankind in our image. God's speaking to the Trinity. So we're made in the image of God. So what's God like? What's the first thing we ever hear about him in Genesis 1? In the beginning, God sat idly in a recliner. In the beginning, God took a vacation. In the beginning, God decided to sleep in. No, the first thing we ever see God do is work. In the beginning, God created. Now, creating is work. I tend to think it's fun work, but it is work. In the beginning, God created. And what we see for the next number of verses is God working. God creating the heavens and the earth. God creating the sky, what he called the firmament. God separating rivers and oceans and dry land. God making plants. God making fish and birds. God making stuff. God engaged. God at work. God serving. So it says, let us make mankind in our image. How about when Jesus came to earth? Maybe Jesus came. Well, Jesus in Luke 19:10 said, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. Those both are action verbs, aren't they? Seeking, saving, those aren't passive verbs. He goes on to say, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. In other words, Jesus said, not only the first time you ever meet God, is he serving and busy doing something. But when Jesus comes to earth, he said, I didn't come to take it easy either. I didn't come to lay up and watch everyone else do things. I came to serve. I didn't come to be served. We don't see his disciples running around and doing things for him. We don't even see his disciples washing his feet. In fact, we see it the other way. We see Jesus showing that if we're in God's image, we engage. We do things. We're active. We're not passive. Now, let me go back. In the beginning, God created. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that, in other words, why would you make man? Let's make him in our image so that they may rule over the fish in the seas and the birds in the sky. Ruling is not passive either, is it? Ruling is not so that they may watch me rule. God didn't say, let me make man so that he can be very passive and sit around a lot and watch me rule stuff. So that they may rule over fish, birds, livestock, animals. So God created mankind in his own image. God blessed them and said, and notice all the verbs, be fruitful, increase, fill the earth, subdue it, rule. In other words, God says, the first thing he says, let's make man like us. And what are we? We're engaged. We are people that are active and do things. Now, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, we are all active. So let's make man like us. They're going to be happiest when they're the most like us because they're created in our image. That means when the more active the people are, the happier they are. Now, he goes on and says, let's make man not to just all the time worship us. Now, that's fine, and that's active too, but that's not all. He tells them, rule, increase, fill, subdue. Subdue is work, isn't it? I mean, subdue brings to mind for me wrestling somebody to the ground and subduing them. These are things that we're engaged in. So we are made in the image of God, and we are made to rule, to increase, to fill, to rule. And ladies, before you go, yeah, but that was man. The Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden. Notice this. This is in chapter 2. Goes on. The Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to what? And work and take care of it. And God commanded the man, you're free to eat from any tree in the garden. You must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat it will die. Then God said, it's not good for man to be alone. I will make a spectator for him. Right? I'll make woman and she won't do anything. She'll just sit around and watch men do stuff. No, I'll make a helper suitable for him. And so then God puts Adam to sleep, takes a rib from the side, creates. God says, up until this point, there was no suitable helper found. I say all that only to say that we are coming into a season where our future depends on our willingness to engage. Now, this has always been true, but I'm not sure maybe that we've ever really stopped and stated this. Our future is not based on how magnetic or attractive the personality of any one of us is or how perfect the performance is. Even though all of those things are important, I'd much rather have someone in front of me who I genuinely like. I'd much rather have them do it well. All of that's important. None of that's the key. The key is how willing are all of us to engage. And what I'm seeing from you guys is not only have you been willing to engage, but also you are enjoying the process. This isn't a 2-week process. We move and now everybody goes back to watching church. In fact, I'm looking for ways for us to all be more engaged in this thing we call the church service. Isn't it funny it's called a church service and yet not hardly any of us think about going to church and serving? I mean, a few of us do, and many of you guys are the ones that do, but by and large we think of it more as a church spectacle or a church, and I go because of what I get. This whole mentality comes out of this, right? And if they don't give me the things I need, if they don't give all the things my family needs, if they don't treat the right way for my kids, or if they don't have the right things for me, or if they're not preaching about exactly what's in my life, I need to go somewhere else. Instead of going, I'll fix it. I'll solve it. I'll serve. It's just how, and by and large, it's how the American church is wired up, and it's not how the churches around the world are wired up. Somehow we have sort of accepted this as our role is to observe. And I don't mean that, I'm not saying that in any way to be saying people aren't willing. I'm saying it to say we haven't created a model that invites you to be part of the process. We got to do that. The future of us as a church, us as a group of people, depends on the fact of every one of you going, why do I go to church? And you go over to Hebrews 10 and you look up where it says, forsake not the assembling of yourself together, and you read the whole sentence, the middle of the sentence. I go because God said I better not forsake the assembly. Not what he said. He said, let us look for ways to urge one another and encourage one another to do good works, forsaking not the assembling of ourselves together. In other words, actually, why he says not to forsake assembling is to go for other people, to go urge others on, to go encourage others, to go be a source of help and encouragement to other people. It is really never in the Bible does it say go to church for you, does it? Do you receive things? Sure, because we're happiest when we serve. What you find is people that are serving aren't the people that leave. They're the most regular attenders. They're the most faithful long-term attenders. You guys are them, so I can say this without it. I hope no one here takes this as I'm saying, get up and get to doing something. You're not doing anything. You guys are them, but us recognizing it and identifying this is how we are happiest. This is how we're most successful. This is also how the body grows to full maturity, is when every ligament, every joint, every bone, everything supplies what it's supposed to, so we don't walk with a limp, so we don't have one hand that we can't pick anything up with, so we're not nearsighted or farsighted, so because everything is functioning at full capacity. It's how we'll survive as a church, but it's also how you'll be blessed the most. God turns around to Peter and some of the other guys, and they're going, Lord, we've given up a lot for you. We have left behind our homes and families. We've done a lot of things that were inconvenient. We've sometimes put you ahead of even what we would have preferred with our family. We've put you ahead sometimes of staying home with the sick kid or fixing dinner or whatever. We've put you ahead of a lot. And Jesus could have said a number of things, but he said, I guarantee you this. There's no one who's given up homes, lands, or anything else that won't be rewarded and more in this life and the next. In other words, it pays off now, it pays off later. And so there's always that question, can I give this up for God. But boy, don't you think he had to answer that question first? When man fell, God looked at his only begotten son and said, can I give this up for them? The challenge is recognizing we never give anything up for God. God always pays back. God always blesses. God always returns, not onefold. Look at Job. Job lost a lot. God gave him back twice. God rewards our faithfulness. And in these coming weeks, in these coming months, we will thrive when each of us take the responsibility to personally thrive. When each of us say, I'm going to be engaged, I'm going to invite, I'm going to do all of the things, I'm going to find places to plug in, I'm going to find places to grow. If I'm a ligament, I'm going to learn to grow into being the most effective ligament I can. If I'm a muscle, I'm going to work myself out so that I am the strongest muscle possible. So, John, I want to close a little differently. Not that would surprise you. In fact, I don't know if there is a norm, so I don't know if you could call this differently. But I want to close a little differently. We're going to do one last song, and it is a song about loving God's house, about God's dwelling place, about it's the best place. And God's house is not this, it's this. And so I'm going to ask you, if you're comfortable doing this, if you're not, it's totally fine, but to come across the aisles and maybe join hands. We're going to close by doing one last worship song, and then we'll do a final prayer. But if you'd stand with us, we're going to do this one last song first, give you an opportunity to worship